Thanks for having me here. I've heard a lot about this facility, never had the chance to actually see it, so it's neat to see. The big thing I always hear about is this ramp going up in the races that take place here, so I had a few of my athletes take part in that, so that's pretty cool. What I guess I'm here to do today is just kind of share some of my experiences that I've had with the wheelchair community with strength and conditioning. I have a strength and conditioning facility out in Burnaby called Performance Institute. We deal with all different sorts of clientele. We deal with all different level of athletes, you know, your everyday Joe looking to get fit. We do active rehab work. Back in 1999, I get to work with an athlete who I just worked with this morning. I did a workshop for para-rowing. So it just came from our facility doing that, and got to work with Yuka Chakyu, who is the first wheelchair athlete I ever got to work with. So I was fresh off my degree from UBC. Pretty creative guy, I think, starting to train. Didn't know anything about working with a wheelchair athlete. So I tried to do some research on it. I was looking at different research topics. There's a fair bit of research out there at the time, but there wasn't any really good practical resources. Some of the resources that I came across were more or less really basic things, and things that I thought just weren't applicable enough for what we needed. And the more I started to work with wheelchair athletes, the more I started to find that it's not just training the upper body alone. It's not just doing some core and upper body alone. There's different things that are necessary and needed to support the body, because the body starts to work in a little bit different ways. So most of my experience is really from Yuka. I get to work with my next athlete was Marnie Abbott, who I'm sure a lot of you guys know Marnie. Marnie's pretty well known. So Marnie got me involved with wheelchair basketball, and it went from the women's national wheelchair basketball team to the men's wheelchair basketball team to national wheelchair rugby and tennis and rowing and wheelchair athletics. And I've had a really nice opportunity to get to work with a number of different sports, a number of different athletes, a lot of different people, and learn a lot. And you know, I always say I've learned as much from those athletes as I'm sure they ever did from me, and it's a constant learning process. And the thing that's really fun about working with this type of population is the creativity and what you really get to come up with to get some good results. So I guess with my unhappiness with what I was able to find with strength and conditioning, kind of practical tools for people to see, I wrote my own book. So I called it Wheelchair Training. I've got some copies here if anyone's interested. And what this is, my goal with this was to create a practical resource for people, for stretching, for postural work, for anybody, be an athlete or not. I just wanted to have a resource for people. My work with wheelchair basketball got to get me traveling around Canada. My goal was to be able to go to set up different pods for national team athletes to work with trainers across the country. And the thing that kept coming up was trainers didn't feel comfortable working with wheelchair athletes and maybe didn't know what to do. And I was supposed to go there and help try to educate trainers and get them comfortable and get them a good understanding on what to do. And that's where this resource kind of came in. So it was a big project. Never thought it would take me as long as it did. But I'm really glad I did it. It's been taken up with quite a few of our national teams, and something I'm pretty proud of that I did. So what I wanted to go through today was part of the procedure. Be you guys aiming to be an athlete or just be active. You guys have a great training facility in there. It's really neat. I was just saying my mind's kind of spinning on some of the research possibilities that you could do out there. Having great equipment like that and having, I guess, the science and computerized aspect to it, there's a lot of really neat things. So pretty lucky to have something like that in our hometown. Regardless of the program, assessment is always critical. You never really know what you're dealing with until you assess somebody. Some of the things that we look at in our assessments: chair setups, biomechanics, how are you pushing, how are you moving, muscle functionality, muscle balance, posture. Posture is a big thing. that I'm going to say a lot today. So posture's really critical. Going back to Marnie Abbott and my experience with the women's national team, probably back in 99, 2000, something like that, was Marnie brought in this photo of the women's national team. And the thing that I noticed was everyone was sitting there with really bad posture. And I was like, something's going on here. And you know, the more and more you start to think about it, and we'll talk about this a fair bit, the more I start to understand that we got to improve posture. And again, I'm always looking at two things. I'm looking at injury prevention, I'm looking at performance. And if we can tackle both those things, it's going to be a good thing. So posture is going to be that reoccurring theme that we talk about. Range of motion, especially through the neck, the shoulders, hip flexors, looking at core stability, or what kind of stabilization do we have, muscular power, agility, speed, conditioning. Okay, so those are some of the things that we're looking at in our assessment. Great quote by John Wooden: don't let what you cannot do interfere with what you can do. In a lot of the workshops, I've had opportunities to do practical things when I'm working with a group of athletes. Inevitably, I always get someone who says, I can't do this, I can't do this, what about this? And I want you to have that mindset on how you can do it. What can you do? If this doesn't work, what does work? And there's so much that's out there that we can do to get everybody stronger and fitter and faster. So common problems that we see: anterior shoulder rotation. So again, looking at that posture of the shoulder, looking at that positioning. We want that optimal position to produce power and to prevent injury. Shoulder impingement, bicep tendonitis. All these things are really related to alignment issues and often overuse issues. Wrist, again, impact issues can always help that. You can't see this, sorry, some of the slides aren't going to come out as well, but it says generally weak. So we're looking at external shoulder rotators, traps, basically all the postural muscles through the upper back, rear delts, serratus, and then common tightnesses is the next part here, which is neck, upper traps, pecs, delts, hip flexors, biceps. So a lot of these internal rotators of the shoulder, okay? So, yeah, we got to stretch, okay? Looking at different sports, again, the more I get to work with different sports, I'm certainly not an expert in being able to nail off every different sport and tell you how the classifications work. It's pretty complicated, and you know, I always tried to come up with a system so I could say, okay, I got a wheelchair basketball player, there's a class 1 athlete or a class 2 athlete, this is what we're dealing with, this is what's going to work. And the more I work with wheelchair sport, the more I find that there's so much individualization within those classifications that we see in the sports, which I think makes it more interesting, makes it more fun, but it takes a lot of thinking to hopefully improve them. So we're looking at, are they complete, incomplete, determined functional musculature, is there issues from the joint, is it neural or is it a strength-based issue? Again, what's the lifestyle? In a lot of the para sports I've got to work with, way back in the early days when I got to work with wheelchair basketball, before it is what it is now, which is extremely high performance, it didn't used to be. Same thing when I started working with wheelchair rugby. It was really in its infancy, at least in terms of strength and conditioning. Athletes were not what I would call high performance. They weren't that 24/7 athlete, you know, that slept properly, ate properly, trained properly, recovered properly. They were an athlete some of the times when they were on the court, and you know, it's really transferred to what it is now, which is true high performance sports. So that's something we're always looking at too, is if I'm dealing with an athlete that wants to improve, overhearing some of you guys in there, it's like everybody else that I hear in the gym saying, you know what, I need to be more consistent with my training. I need to eat better. I need to sleep better. All those issues are the same. So we got to make sure we're looking at the person as a whole. Are there sport-specific needs? So going back to posture, unfortunately this photo doesn't come out very well, but this is a picture of Sheer Golden. She's done rowing and skiing, and I worked with her a lot with the national team in wheelchair basketball. And it's a shot of her doing a one-arm chin-up in her chair. Pretty big feat of strength. Very strong girl. I love these quotes here about posture. Posture dictates function. And then the other one by Charlie Francis, if it looks right, it flies right. And that's a big premise, a big part of what I believe in with training, is we've got to get the body in as good of a position as possible to make it work and function as well as we can, be it for everyday life or be it for performance in sport. So some of the big things that really came to my attention with working with wheelchair athletes, the lumbar spine. I think it's pretty easy to see what goes on through the neck and the shoulders, head position. But I think if you look a little further, you can see what happens through that lumbar spine. And so the note there is sitting all day can largely contribute to tight hip flexors. If those hip flexors are in a shortened position, that's going to contribute to spine issues. And you can see your iliopsoas muscles attaching, usually like L2, L3, L4, L5, down to the head of the femur or the iliacus, and those muscles get quite tight. And when they're tight, they're going to be pulling on the spine, contributing to increased stress, okay? So we need to do something to work on that. In some cases, we can do additional core strengthening. In a lot of cases, we need to do a lot of stretching for that. And this is something, I'll show you a stretch that you can try, something that we should be doing daily. Looking upstairs, looking at that thoracic spine. So again, if we've got an increased curvature of that lumbar spine, the same thing will tend to happen through the upper back, and we'll tend to see rounding through the upper back. So that upper back is often called a kyphosis, okay? So we want to work on realigning that spine. I think this is a big contributor to what I see. I was just talking a lot with the rowers that I just worked with. You know, I had a couple rowers in there I'd never seen before, and they were asking me about the rotator cuff issues and their shoulder impingement issues. And I dialed it back, instead of just looking at the specific muscles, which still need to be addressed, but looking at that posture first. So if we can get that posture right, we're going to get a better pull for those rowing athletes. So again, you can see this is one of my wheelchair basketball players just doing a postural photo. So about 3 years ago now, we started getting all of our athletes up against this posture grid. So we have them up against a plumb line, and we can see what their alignment's like versus ideal. And it's really nice to see for our clients. So for here, you can see against the plumb line, we should have a nice line through the hip, through the shoulder, through the ears. And you can see, even in his basketball chair, you can see a fair bit of rounding through the back, head forward position, shoulder coming forward. So pretty powerful, not only for myself and our trainers, but also for the athlete to be able to go, oh, I'm not sitting as well as maybe I thought I was. And that's something that we can compare over time. So we're looking at that shoulder position, alignment, head position, spinal alignment, a lot of different shots. So I wanted to try, see some people are eating and holding drinks still. If you're holding a drink or you're holding food, you don't have to do this, but give it a shot if you can. I just wanted to do a few simple tests that you guys can try just to see where your flexibility is at. So first thing, talking about posture, if we can get everyone sitting up nice and tall. See, we're looking better already. Okay, and let's try a neck rotation, guys. So when we do this, the big cheat a lot of people do if you have a tight neck is you'll turn your whole body and think, I'm turning my head. Keep your shoulders still and just try to turn your head. So can I have everyone turn your head to the right? Okay. Ideally, you should be able to get that chin roughly over your shoulder. Okay? So some of you are pretty good. Some of you guys are pretty tight. Can I show you guys one other little trick? I saw about 50% of you, when you went to go do that, you did a pop forward and then around. Okay? That's also a cheat. So we gotta test this with good alignment. So everyone think of tucking their chin back and then try to do that rotation. Okay?
You've got a headrest on that stuff.
That could be tricky, couldn't it? Yeah. So roughly what we're looking for here, guys, these are a few little simple tests I wanted to show you. Ideally, we want to have roughly about 90 degrees of rotation. Okay? So roughly that chin right over top of the shoulder. Okay? That's also a stretch you can try to do too. Looking at lateral flexion, so again, so we don't do that little cheat. I don't want to have the head drop forward, but if everyone can try packing their chin in again and just try laterally tilting their head. So what's that? Yeah, I got this in my head too, you know, it's not easy. I'm not used to this echoey stuff. And try the other side. And something that you can do, guys, is roughly look for what's my range of motion. Does one side feel tighter than the other? Okay. With locomotion in a chair, the neck's going to tend to get quite tight. So this is something that we need to make sure we're really taking care of. But again, when you do those stretches and you're doing this work, make sure you're doing it from a good position. Okay. So you're not doing a full rotation. You're always keeping that chin, trying to stay as neutral as possible. Okay. Shoulder flexion. Okay, so everyone's still sitting up nice and tall. Let's see how far you can raise your arm up, keeping that bicep nice and tight to your ear. Well, there's a lot of questions. What's going on? Try to keep that arm nice and tight to your ear. Keep your arm straight. It's pretty good. And let's try the other arm. Try to keep your arm straight. Just try to get a feel for, is there a difference in flexibility? Does it feel the same? Does it feel like you're having to work really hard to raise that arm up? Okay? So in some cases, again, your shoulders are going to have to work really hard because your lats are so tight. In some cases, maybe there's a shoulder issue going on that's going to make it harder. Maybe you've got an anterior position of that shoulder which is making it harder and you're getting some clicking and grinding. Okay? So again, we need to fix your alignment. Okay? Shoulder extension. So ideally, we want to be about 180 degrees, so straight up and down. Shoulder extension. Reaching back far as you can. So again, not out to the side, but straight back. How far back can you reach? Okay, again, think of your shoulder position, not popping forward, but trying to stay set back in a good alignment. Okay, ideally, we're looking at about 50 to 60 degrees extension. Okay, if you're missing that and you're doing a chest press in the gym, what's going to happen to your shoulder? All of a sudden your shoulder's going to collapse because you're too tight. So we got to make sure you've got good extension through that shoulder to really press properly. Okay? The more I train people, the more I find mobility and having good range of motion is extremely important to be able to do better in sport, in the gym, reduce strains. It's just critical. Apley scratch test. This is the top end of it. Can you reach your other shoulder blade? Can you stay up tall and reach one shoulder blade? Try the other side. Do you have the same range of motion? So the goal is you should be able to reach that inner portion of the shoulder blade on the opposite side and then go behind the back. Check out your internal rotators. This is often where people get into trouble. Can you reach that opposite shoulder blade? And then same thing, try the other one. Is it tight? Is it painful? These are basic ranges of motion that we should have, okay? Really watch your shoulder position when you do that one. That one tends to round out. Thomas test talked about hip flexors. Here's Bo Hedges, one of our basketball players. This guy is, he'd be embarrassed if I said this, but this guy has just been so inspiring. He came from, where the heck was he from? Prince George, I think. And he moved down to the lower mainland. He was kind of borderline provincial player when he first came down and decided he really wanted to make the national team. He wanted to go to the Paralympics. So he moved down to Vancouver, trained with, you know, Jamie Borisov and some of the other cover models you have in your magazines over there, and trained his tail off. And he did a lot of this mobility work. He was there, you know, he'd always come to our gym about a half hour before his session, do his rolling and kind of self-massage work that we taught him, and he does his stretching, and then he works hard and continued, and he won a Paralympic gold medal for basketball. And I can't give this guy enough credit for the work that he's done and how he's taken care of his body. So pretty inspiring guy. The Thomas test, or Thomas stretch, we'll call it. This is something you could do on the edge of a bed, on the edge of a table. He's just pulling one knee in towards his chest, allowing the other leg to hang down. It's a simple way to stretch out your hip flexors. Pretty safe for most people. Again, if it doesn't work for you, I'm not going to say across the board this is going to work for everybody. Another variation you could do is just lie on your back while you're in bed. Just bring one knee up towards your chest to stretch out that opposing hip flexor. So going back to those hip flexors get tight, if we can loosen that up. For those of you that can stand, make sure you're doing that to open up your hips. Okay? Sure. Yeah.
The knee pops up. Do you suggest a little weight over the knee to hold it down?
It depends how tight it is. Quite often initially you have a fair bit of spasming, but that's something over time generally will start to dissipate for sure. So if it's really, really tight, I would just start with the legs straight out and then kind of graduate into more of this position. I wouldn't right off the bat, but once your body's used to getting in that position, it may take you a couple months to get there, then you can start to apply a bit of pressure and try to open up the hips a bit more, yeah. But just be careful. I mean, in some cases, you guys are going to have decreased bone density, and so you don't want to be too aggressive with that either. So you need to be smart with it, and for the most part, let gravity do its thing. Yeah. So again, a 20-second stretch isn't going to cut it. You guys should probably be doing this about 5 or 10 minutes aside. Okay. If you really want to see those effects. Other things I've seen, palpation through the upper traps. So if you just want to feel through your upper traps, does that feel kind of tight? Does that feel kind of tight in there? How many of you guys have sore necks or sore shoulders? There's a couple, yeah. The rowing group I had, I think we had about 30 people in there. I think I had 28 hands up when I asked them that. This is stuff we got to take care of, okay? So simple thing you can do. I was showing my rowers today how to get a lacrosse ball. So you could just pop a lacrosse ball down in your trap and then add in a stretch, okay? You could use your fingers. Or if someone wants to give you a massage, that's nice too. Symptoms of impingement, again, if your shoulder's in that anterior position, are you going to get some tenderness through the front of the shoulders, okay? Fix the position, that goes away. Palpation through the forearms, again, I deal with a lot of different sports that deal with tight forearms, so that's something that can really lead to some nasty, golfer's elbow, tennis elbow, and that's unfortunately with all the doctors and physios I've ever talked to, hoping to find that miracle cure that would get rid of it, haven't found it. So you want to make sure that you keep those forearms nice and loose to prevent it. So core. So what does the core do? What does the core do, guys? Does anyone know? Yeah?
Actually, it supports your entire skeleton.
Great. Good. So supports the spine, supports the skeleton, supports spinal joints and protect joint structures from repetitive microtrauma, prevent recurring pain, degenerative changes, provide support, right? So often they'll talk about, when they talk about core, they'll talk about that keystone theory, that big block that will support the whole system. If that goes, you're not supported, okay? You got to be linked together to be strong. So why core training? Stabilizes the center of gravity within its base of support. We're providing balance. Control forces. So again, with a lot of the athletes I'm dealing with, be it torsional, shearing, compressional forces, we're trying to support the body to protect it, to be able to stabilize it, to perform. Improve the balance, increase body control, decrease injury, improve posture. Again, we're looking from those two sides. We're looking to decrease injury, improve performance. So in a case, I put up a picture of a wheelchair rugby player there. So what in the case of an athlete or a person that doesn't have functional core? So we talked about our core kind of being our abdominals, our lower back. What happens if those muscles aren't working anymore to support you? Then what? So to me, then your core becomes the supporting structures that you still got, be it your lats, your shoulders, your pecs. You've still got that support system, and that is your core. So when I first started doing training and doing workshops talking about core training, it was really localized to, well, we're doing core training. But I want you guys to think of it as a bigger system. It's your support system. It's exactly what you said. It supports the spine. It supports the body. It controls forces. So whatever your core is, that's what we got to make as strong as possible. Getting into training, I had some slides up here on periodization. The big gist of this is for athletes, for everybody, you always want to think about if you're trying to improve performance, if you're trying to get stronger, if you're trying to get faster, if you're trying to improve your fitness, we always need that baseline of stimulus. We're going to have fatigue after that workout. This line is basically our our norm, if you will. So we're going to have that stimulus, our workout, we're going to have fatigue, and then you rebound out of that into that overcompensation or supercompensation, and hopefully we're going to start to get better. Over time, we're going to see that gradual influx. Unfortunately, with training, I've tried and it doesn't work. You need to unload athletes. Ideally, what we want to see is over time, we're going to see progression slowly build and build and build. So we're getting stronger, we're getting faster, we're improving our mobility, we're improving our posture. All those things are starting to come together, but we got to manipulate the variables a little bit. Okay? No matter who I've worked with, it always seems to be, every few months, I always seem to come across somebody that comes in, gets assessed, wants me to get them on a program, and they said, well, I've been doing this program for the last 10 years. Okay? What do you think their results are? Do you think they're going to be good? No. Okay? Everyone kind of knows it, right? But you get into the gym, a lot of people get into the gym and they're like, well, you know, I do this and then I do this and throw in a few water breaks, talk to the girls, and then I do this again, and that's what I do every day. So you got to make sure you're manipulating the variables, you're doing the things that are going to get you results, okay? So if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got, sort of thing, and maybe worse. So you got to make sure that you're always changing the variables. If you don't stimulate the body, we're going to get this lack of stimulation, and we're not going to get that optimal increase, okay? So we got to really stress the body, make sure it recovers well, but you got to stress it well as well. I wish you guys could see that. It's a sweet shot. I wish Richard was here. He's always working hard, that guy. That's when he had no hair. Yeah. So in our warm-up, do you guys think a warm-up's important? Yeah? Again, it's kind of nice. I just worked with the rowers a couple hours ago, so I can use them as an example. Same thing. Rowers, a lot of them are like, yeah, I don't really warm up enough when I go. I just get out on the boat and I start to go, or I do my lifts and I just kind of get at it. You got to make sure you're really warming up your body. I put some examples that I'll do. I'll do on-court sessions with wheelchair basketball. Some of the things that we'll do, we reinforce posture with pushing mechanics. Obviously, a lot of what wheelchair basketball does, wheelchair rugby does, they're pushing in their chairs. We got to have that good position for posture. If they don't, they'll break down. We'll do forwards work. We'll do backwards work. We do a lot of stuff to try to counter all the forwards work that they do. We'll do alternating work. We'll do gradual build-ups. Get them accelerating and decelerating with good alignment, hopefully. Looking at self-massage. Again, talking with the rowers, I really went overboard with them this morning, I think. Hopefully I didn't. I'm sure I'll hear about it. I probably spent about an hour and a half talking about rolling and self-massage. Any of you guys do self-massage right now? Good. Couple hands. Few hands. Good. Sorry. Some of the things that we used, I think back in 2000, back in 2000, I was in Montreal at a hockey-specific strength and conditioning conference, and there's this guy, Pete Friesen, who's the strength coach for Carolina Hurricanes, and he brought out this foam roller, and I didn't really know, me and probably most of the other people in the crowd didn't really know what the heck to do with this, and so he asked for a volunteer. So there's about 50 strength coaches, and idiot me volunteered to go up to the front, and he had me rolling on them, and I was almost in tears, but trying to keep a brave face in front of the crowd. Some of this stuff can be quite painful when you do it. We want good pain. We want to create good changes within the muscle tissue. But the more I work with every different kind of athlete and every different kind of person, the more I really am a big, big believer in you guys doing self-massage. You guys using massage therapists, okay? Self-massage is great, and I want everyone in here to be doing it. I have my 2-year-old who copies me and my wife in our living room, and he's starting to roll himself. He doesn't know what he's doing yet, but he's starting to do it. It's really important. They have different tools out there. There's one called the Stick we've used for years. There's another similar product called the Tiger Tail. This is something that's pretty useful for a lot of areas like your forearms and your neck, your legs, your low back. It's good for. There's a lot of simple tools you can use, like lacrosse balls, tennis balls, softballs, for really loosening up a lot of those tight areas. Some of those simple tests we're going through, your shoulders, your lats, your pecs, We've got some trainers in here that I'm sure can help you out with that later on today. And I'm going to leave you guys a couple resources too. There's foam rollers like we talked about. A great website where you can see a lot of samples. Obviously YouTube, if you guys check out YouTube, there's a lot. I just got to read this. The other one is TP Therapy, so it's called Trigger Point Therapy, tptherapy.com. If you look there, there's a lot of different samples you can do. You can choose your neck, see how you can roll your neck out, your chest out. So different samples you can try. There's another book written by a guy, Kelly Starrett, called Becoming the Supple Leopard. It's a funny name, but it's actually a really good book, and it shows a lot of these release techniques that you can try. Again, everything's not going to work for everybody, but give it a try and see how it feels. Always be smart when applying pressure to the body. Always try to apply a stretch to it, but I've seen some pretty dramatic changes with our clients. Dynamic stretching, again, this is something that we really preach prior to an athlete going to row, to compete in whatever, going to workout, okay? So simple things we did, some of the tests that we did, again, we're going to try and reinforce dynamically. Why dynamically? Dynamically just means movement, so we're going to try to apply movement to a stretch, not holding it too long, so we're going to try to get the nervous system going prior to working out, okay? If we were to just hold a stretch for a minute at a time, it's going to dampen the nervous system down. You're not going to be able to perform. So even if I'm going into the gym, I'm going to go do my workout, I still want to do some of these things. So everything's going to be controlled. Most of your stretches, rather than holding for long durations, is going to be 3 or 4 seconds. Okay? So you can do all different sorts of things like a neck stretch. I like to always do one arm behind the back, and you can do that neck stretch if you need to work on that rotation. You can do lateral flexion. So an example would be do a lateral flexion, hold that 3 seconds, come up, my chin's packed. I do the same thing over to the other side. Okay? Focus on the areas that are tight. Focus on the areas that you're going to work out. Okay? If you're really tight in one area, make sure you're really spending a lot more time in those areas. Everybody's got different areas that need mobility work, and you got to make sure you address those. Next up in terms of our warm-up is we should be doing muscle activating. Okay, so we've loosened up the tissues by doing some self-massage work. We've done some dynamic stretching. Then we want to get into muscle activation. Okay, again, this is in the case of I'm going to go do a workout in the gym. I'm going to go compete in a sport. So different things you can do, like a stick 'em up. Everyone try lifting your arms up in the air. Okay. Did I put Dr. Jones on here? I'm just going to do stick 'em up. So you're going to have your thumbs down to the shoulders. Try to keep your elbows down to your sides, or think of bringing your elbows down to your back pockets if you have them. Okay? So what I'm seeing in the group, some people are dropping through here. Okay? Try that again. Reach right up. Try to keep your forearms straight up and down. Try to get your thumbs down to the shoulders. Pull your elbows down to your sides. Ideally, what I want you getting out of this is you're going to get a bit of a chest-shoulder stretch. You should feel your upper back muscles activating. Can you guys feel that? Okay, very simple stretch to get your postural muscles supporting you. External shoulder rotations. Simple drill will do a lot. If you have a TheraBand, just keeping your elbows in tight, trying to externally rotate. I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen that. This is a drill that I think is a must for a lot of people. Doing quick little front to back circles with your arms, so try not to hit the person next to you, but just quick little circles, okay? It's just going to help activate the rotator cuff. So you're always thinking stay tall, stay in a good set position with your shoulders, okay? We'll do different things like medicine ball drills. Again, with the group I had this morning, we were teaching them all different sorts of medicine ball drills they could do to really get their nervous system going, work on power development. Don't throw medicine balls through drywall, it doesn't work well. Strength training. Forget his name, Brad. He was climbing the Chief in a chair. Got to work with him a couple sessions before doing that, but pretty crazy. Quality of movement. So again, we've talked a lot about alignment. We've talked a lot about posture. Some of the big foundations that I think you really need to consider with a good strength training program. Mobility. Again, good range of motion. Proprioception. Working on body awareness. We all need to make sure we've got great body awareness when we're working. Core strength and periodization, okay? So manipulating the variables, changing what you're doing to force adaptation. And that will help us get some of those key benefits we're looking for with power and strength and balance. Okay? Some considerations for strength training. Again, there's a lot of great equipment I just saw. It's my first time in the building. It's great. With some of the equipment in there, you're not going to need it as much. With a lot of the stuff I do with athletes, it's a lot more free weight type things that I'm doing medicine ball work, doing a lot of different things. So both things have their merit and their place. Some of the things we're always looking for is develop mobility and alignment first. In a lot of cases with athletes that I've worked with, I've stopped doing a lot of pressing movements if their posture really needs a lot of work, okay? If my goal is to improve alignment of the shoulders and they're really stuck in a forward position, does it make sense to try to shorten up those muscles and make it worse, okay? So we're going to do everything we can to really work on opening them up. I do this a lot more than I ever did when I first started, is use spinal support whenever possible to reinforce depression, retraction, give feedback. So what that means is we've got a lot of cages in our gym that we'll use. There's supports in there that you can use to get your back resting up against a wall, up against a bar, just to reinforce good posture, give you some feedback on keeping your shoulders back in a good position, okay? There's nothing like getting some good feedback to make sure you're doing the exercise properly. Wrist straps with heavier loads. When we're doing a lot of heavy loading with our athletes with pressing, we use a lot of wrist supports just to protect them. I think from pushing in a chair, you can get a lot of repetitive use in those wrists, so we got to make sure they stay healthy. We use sticks and dowels for supporting chairs all the time. Our facility being out of 8 rinks, we get a lot of dead hockey sticks that we get to use. And within the workout, including myofascial release, had a big discussion again, so self-rolling, had a big discussion again about when to stretch. Okay, we talked about the dynamic stretching before. We're going to talk about static stretching at the end in a second here. And intermittently, you can also add in different rolling techniques. Okay, you can add in different stretching. And I've started to do a lot more of that than I ever used to within my workouts, because I'm usually of the mentality when I'm training is we want to warm up, we want to get them going, we got to get to work, and then they're done. And often when our athletes are done, they're gone. So we got to make sure that we spend time, and I think this applies to everybody, be it an athlete or not, is that posture and your mobility and your alignment is such a big issue. You need to make that a priority within the workout as well. So some sample postural drills. There's Yuka. Chin tucks. Very simple. So we talked about that within our stretch. Can everyone try that? It's maybe not the sexiest posture, but I want everyone to try to make a double chin. Can everyone do that? So you're not going to be sliding your head up, you're not going to be sliding down, but just try to bring your chin straight back. You should feel a little bit of tensing through the back of the neck. Okay? A lot of us will tend to get this head forward position, puts a lot of stress through that cervical spine. And just by doing those simple chin tucks, I'd have you hold that about 10 or 15 seconds at a time and then relax. Really works on creating a better head position. External shoulder rotations we talked about. There's Bo doing an external shoulder rotation. Whoops. Big thing there, if you're doing that exercise, there was another book, I saw another resource and it had that exercise in there too. Make sure you're feeling the back of the shoulders, okay? For all these exercises that we're talking about and everything that you're doing, a lot of these band drills, you really need to make sure you're activating the right muscles, okay? You could do an exercise like this and just feel your biceps, and it's not really going to be the appropriate loading pattern that you're looking for. We want to make sure that you're addressing the right muscles. So in an exercise like that, you want to be feeling the back of your shoulders. If not, you got to talk to your trainer. Floor flatteners, this is the easiest looking, hardest drill you could ever try. You can do this in the bed if you want to. We have a Bosu just under Bo's knees just to try to get his low back flat. So again, we'll have a lot of our guys either just bend their knees, get their legs up on their chair, get them up on a bench, get them supported with a Bosu, something to keep that lower back flat. And then essentially what they're doing is just trying to push their wrists and elbows down to the floor and sliding their arms up and down. So it looks really simple, but it's a great stretch for your lats, your shoulders, your chest, and then it works on strengthening the upper back at the same time. So that's a real simple drill you guys can try, essentially like that stick 'em up we all just did, except you're pushing down into the floor, okay? It looks simple, but trust me, that's a good one you should try. T's, Y's, and I's. Okay, so here's Yuka up here on an incline bench. We've propped her up a little bit to support her head. You could do this on the floor as well. You could do this on a bench. You could do this even face down. And essentially you're doing a movement that looks like a T. Okay, you're doing a movement that looks like a Y. You're doing a movement sort of looks like a Y, an I. Okay, and again, targeting all those postural muscles. Okay, if your shoulders are rounded, if you get any pinching through the front of the shoulder, if you've had rotator cuff issues, these are some really good exercises for you. Band pull-aparts. Okay, she's bringing palms down, bringing that band right across the top of her chest. Okay, pulling apart. We do a lot of focus on all these postural muscles, postural drills that you guys can incorporate. Again, with a lot of our athletes, this is something that we'll do, again, trying to do a reverse movement from a push. So we're basically doing a resisted backwards pull. Again, really working on reinforcing this good position here. So chin being tucked, shoulders back, getting her shoulder blades to be set back. I was looking at the, what do you call it? The piece of artwork in the back there. And I couldn't help but kind of analyze the shoulder position, and it was actually really good. So that's a good model over there too. Flexibility, I always like to show my grandma. It's not. But she stretches too. So some big considerations we should be looking for. Again, we've talked about your chest and lats and shoulders, hip flexors, quads, thoracic spine. Okay, working on really trying to stay open all the time, not being compressed. So we want to stay nice and tall. Forearms, and again, I put massage and self-massage. I think that's really key, okay? So we talked about dynamic stretching. What about static stretching? So I know there's going to be someone smart in the crowd. If I was to say, for your stretches, your static stretches where you're holding them for a longer period of time, how long would you hold those stretches for? Can you venture a guess? 30 seconds? Anyone else? What's that? Maybe. Any other guesses? Okay, I've seen one of these people before. So a lot of people will say, when I first started training, everything that we were taught was always that 20 to 30 second period. And we're really starting to push those boundaries a lot longer now into that 1 minute, maybe even 2 minute mark. Okay? It's not necessarily the more the better, so I wouldn't recommend on all your stretches holding them 10 minutes. You can potentially have a negative effect by doing that. But our two things that we always look at are duration of the stretch and intensity of the stretch. So what about the intensity of the stretch? If I was to give you a 1 out of 10 scale, and 10 felt like someone was sticking you with a knife in your chest as you're doing a chest stretch, okay? How hard should that stretch be? On a 1 out of 10 scale, 10 being the knife. I heard a 3. Anyone else? 6. Deeper as you go. Anyone else? 6 to 8. Oh, you could be a trainer. Anyone else? Okay, so the idea is, at least when we're starting, I like to keep it down about this 3 or 4 level. Okay? We use a concept called microstretching by a guy from, he was in Vancouver, he's out of the UK now, doing his PhD, called Nikos Apostolopoulos. And yes, I do love to say his name. He came up with this microstretching idea, and the idea being that when you do a stretch, if you go too hard, you're actually going to cause a reaction to that stretch. So if you think about, am I allowed to move? I'm going off camera. If you go into a stretch and you did this where you were saying like a 10, okay, we'll say an 8, and you went too hard on that stretch, what's going to happen is you're going to have muscles contracting against that stretch. Okay? So you've got one force trying to pull out, you got another force trying to pull in, and you're going to start to get some micro tears. You're going to actually start to do some damage. Okay? So it's not always more the better. Okay? Start with that lower range, 3 or 4. What Nikos would always say is it should feel like you're putting your hand in lukewarm water. you should have a little sensation, but it shouldn't be too much. Okay, so have it as a gentle pull, don't kill yourself. A lot of other things in here, breathing rhythmically. Essentially, with your stretching, always stretch with good alignment, work on your tight areas. Okay, figure out what's tight, spend a lot of time on those areas. Most of us, just like I was using that example of the person on the 10-year program, most of us always do the same stretches too. I was shown these stretches and I do these all the time, but you didn't maybe venture out and try some other ones too. So always try to explore, try some new ones. If you don't feel some, I would still maintain, but work on finding those tight areas. We all have them. Some of the, I guess, more global concepts that we're looking at when we're training for sport, we got to really find some balance, so we're really making sure that that athlete is improving. So we need to look at that overall volume. We need to look at their strength training program, their energy system work, or their cardio, if you will, their speed, power work, and then their technical work. So on a sport like rowing, we work with all the able-bodied developmental rowers. So we've had, I think, about 10 of them now get called up to the national team. And one of the big things is it's unbelievable the volume of training that these guys do. So we're constantly having to make sure we're trying to get them stronger, we're trying to get them better, but we need to really be careful with their volume because most of these athletes are working out at least twice a day, sometimes 3 times a day. Okay, so that's something that we're often having to consider. Now, from the other side is if you're having a hard time getting into the gym once a week, just get to work, okay? This one didn't really come up too well, but this is just kind of my concluding thoughts with performance. Is just looking at peak performance and the overlay of the art and the science. And again, just going back to what I've found over the years of working with people in chairs, working with athletes, is there's always some art to it, there's always some science to it. And we're trying to use those good scientific principles to see good changes, but there's always some art to it. And everyone's unique, doesn't matter what classification you may be put into. Don't let what someone tells you you're limited to this ever be your envelope. One of my neatest experiences I had was getting to work with a wheelchair rugby athlete, and I remember he could raise his arm up to about there when we first started, and his goal was to be able to turn on a light switch, and we had him up to about 160 degrees after he was at about 60 degrees. Okay, so always try to achieve more, always try to push yourself to reach as far as you can, and keep pushing the envelope, keep seeing those good improvements, and you'll see changes happen. So hopefully you guys can start to apply some of these exercises that you've seen and some concepts. You guys have a great facility to work with here. There's a lot of people around town. I know BC's kind of an innovator, I think, and a leader in working with wheelchair sport. So hopefully you guys take advantage of that, and hopefully you got some good information out of this today. Thanks a lot, guys.